All right, guys, welcome back to the fifth installment of our conversation on Simone de Beauvoir's The Ethics of Ambiguity. Luke Johnson.
And Jordan Klein.
We're getting good at those cues. That was a good little transition there. I like that. So we had the wonderful, wonderful curse of not having a lot of time to prepare for today. We shot on Thursday and we're back here on Monday, but we've been upgraded to such a tremendous studio. When that opportunity happens, you just got to take it, right?
Precisely.
Yeah. So I did have time to go over what we did for last podcast. It was a long burner, but it was good. I felt like we hit a good stride there. I felt like it was funny. I felt like it was informative, and the audio was incredible. And we have to thank our engineer, Matt Heilman, for doing this. This is such an incredible opportunity that he has allowed us to do. You obviously know that the professional studio here has massively been upgraded over what we traditionally do. So today we're just going to be covering pages 60 through 78. Okay, I have about like 3.5 pages of notes, so I imagine this will probably take about 30 minutes or so. If you would like to be able to take this podcast with you and not just watch it on YouTube or something like that, where can they find this, Jordan?
They can go to the App Store and download the Noetic app.
Right, and on the Noetic app, you will find that there will be a course on Simone de Beauvoir's The Ethics of Ambiguity, and in the seminar section, you'll be able to find this and 4 other episodes, and then the subsequent ones that we will be building. But while you're there, check out some stuff. We've done a lot of stuff this past weekend. I've done some stuff on pedagogy and philosophy with Hunt Lyman. That was super informative. And then on Saturday, right, if you want to plug this.
Yeah, we had the opportunity to interview Cliff Brooks. And we talked about the intersection of poetry and philosophy, and it was a complete blast. Cliff is a total riot.
Yeah, both hyper engaging, super intelligent dudes who provided us with a ton of intellectual content. Actually made our jobs so easy. I had to ask each of them 3 questions because they were just such torrents of information. It was really, really wonderful. Okay, all right. So this is where we earn our money. Okay, and we earn our money by you guys donating on the app. So. Let's get into it, pages 60 through 65. We talked about last time about how it was so easy for nihilists to be transformed into the cogs in the totalitarian machine, right? So Simone de Beauvoir is not exactly finished with examining different responses to the ambiguous condition. It's a little unclear exactly what the genuine man is going to do, what the ethical constitution of the genuinely existing ethical existentialist is. But we might be tempted to think of an alternative to the ambiguous condition that is yet to be splayed open. Do you know which one she considers the one I have in mind?
I mean, are we going to talk about the passionate man?
We are going to talk about the passionate man.
Got some
yes,
man,
sir.
Did that. Nihilists, got them, check, and on to the passionate man.
We got the subman, we've got the different species of nihilism, and so we're going to talk about the passionate man today. Okay? How could anyone object to being a passionate man? Jordan, here's the deal. I pride myself on being a passionate man, okay? Until I read this, I saw no sort of downside in it. I don't know. What do you think about people who are passionate? Do you have any negative connotation about people who are associated with passionate lust for life?
Oh, I mean,
or passionate about the profession or something they do?
I would say, in my mind, the only negative connotation of passion would be like a crime of passion.
Well, Simone de Beauvoir is going to think that you shouldn't think that way. She's going to think that the passionate man actually has some sort of existential pathology. And I'll maybe if I get a little bit in full sort of disclosure here a little bit. A lot of times I can't stop talking about what we're doing at the Noetic. At Noetic. I'm so passionate about what we're doing. I'm so on fire about what we're doing. I recently, not too long ago, I went to my doctor who has a passing interest in philosophy. And he saw this fire in my eyes. And he said, Luke, you seem really inspired. And it had this negative connotation, mm-hmm. And I was just like, why is there this negative connotation in this? And I think the idea is that there's some sort of, as many values as passionate people have, there's a hint of sadness, anguish, frustration in the projects of the passionate man. And Simone de Beauvoir is going to address that a little bit today. So much so that we usually talk about people who are really passionate as almost being individuals who express in what modern day terminology would be called bipolar disorder. I'm sure people at home wonder, like, okay, what's the deal with this Luke Johnson kid? Like, he could string a sentence together. He has cool friends. Why is he so radically individualistic? Where's his family? Where's his beautiful wife? Where's all of that? And she's going to say that there's something alienating about the passionate man. This sort of struck a nerve. Do you want to elaborate on this a little bit?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of interesting because where the sort of adventurous nihilist lacks content, and she finally defines content in this text as meaningful human action, she says that a person who's really passionate lacks this individuality and the ability to really connect with people because they're so consumed by this one singular passion. If they can't connect with someone over this passion, then they're just irrelevant.
Right. So let's talk about that a little bit more. So let's talk about the singular consuming nature of that passion, right? She's talking the passionate man is going to be just like the subman or whatever. He's going to subscribe to like this absolute. He's creating his own absolute, right? And the issue with that, and like you said, is like anyone who falls outside of those parameters for the passionate man is going to be someone that is going to be just a matter of utility, someone that can be disposed of. There's something terrorizing about the passionate man. As charismatic as the passionate man can be, there can be a tremendous offset to it. Right? Like, so that's the real issue with it.
And she makes an excellent point because she says that the passionate person is aware of their dependence on this passion for experiencing and like feeling a sense of fulfillment, which is ultimately elusive.
Right. So what do you think the anguish is that's in the passionate man? Right? Like he sets up this absolute, this ideal for himself. Where does the anguish come from? I mean, you're a passionate woman, right? Like you're hyper dedicated.
One might say.
I would say so, right? Like you and I are thriving on passion doing this project. Is there any sort of anguish in your life, or have you ever been so devoted to something passionately where there has been anguish in your life?
Yeah, and I would say part of the frustration in that is there's no finite point for it. So for me, you could say that I'm passionate about learning, but there's no endpoint to it. It's just a continual, perpetual thing. So
you're blessed with that, right? But I guess maybe I should reveal like sort of an anecdote from sort of like a past life, and when I was so sort of passionate about making it as a rock star or whatever, I had to hit certain sort of metrics in order to be a success, to be legitimated, to be coordinated or whatever. So when you set those things up and you don't achieve them, there's ultimately this form of disappointment that's like implicit in the whole striving, right? Whereas like what we're doing here at Noetic and learning and stuff like that, it's also endless, right? Like we don't have like these fictitious goals set up for Noetic where like we have to have 1,000 users by the end of the month, or we have to make $100 million by this time 2 years from now, or something like that.
Right. So that's a key distinction that Simone makes, is that it's dangerous when the passionate person makes the sort of object of their passion like an actual object.
Right.
Or something concrete, because if you can't obtain that specific thing, that it just sets you up for disappointment and failure and disillusionment.
And also, too, what if you attain that certain thing, right? Like, what if I had gotten my wish, right? What if I had gotten that Grammy at like 25, right? Like, what if I had gotten a gold record at 26 or 27? Well, what else are you living for, right? You kind of become like the has-been that we talked about last time. And I mean, I think that's the thing, is you get so many people, it's weird. I noticed this phenomenon where you see people who pursue their passions and then achieve them at a relatively young age, and then they don't know what to do with themselves, and they engage in tremendous self-abuse with the result of drug addiction and alcohol abuse and whatever else, right? It's like, well, where do I go from here? Like, what else do I have to live for? This idol of an ideal that I've set up for myself no longer confers any sort of value in my life. I've transcended it. you know?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, unfortunately, I really hate to say this, and I don't say this lightly because I'm very well acquainted with the tragedy. I think this is probably why you see so many direct and indirect suicides with people who are in the arts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, I mean, I'm no stranger to people taking their lives either directly or indirectly. So I think there's a lot of philosophical relevance with what Simone's saying here. But I mean, what's interesting here is that you don't want to decry the passionate man entirely, right? Because there's some good that comes from the passionate man, right? And what is the good? It's not like just the passionate man is going around using people for his own maniacal ends. In that mania of the thing that he's pursuing, something good comes out of it. Specifically, what?
I mean, art, especially.
Yeah, art's a tremendous example, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, or whatever. I mean, who are some other besides maybe splaying myself open here and saying that I could be this character, who are some other individuals that were passionate, that gave, I've said the word tremendous like 7 times today, gave really incredible contributions to society just because they were zealots about what they were doing. We were speaking about
an example that we were talking about off mic, Steve Jobs.
Yeah, he was utterly, totally obsessed with unleashing the power of personal computing, right? I mean, really, anybody who's any sort of luminary has that sort of crazy dedication to an ideal. I mean, I wonder if you could say someone like Martin Luther King was like that, or if maybe, or maybe his passion was a different type of passion. Maybe it was sort of a religious passion and falls out of that category. Now we're getting in sort of the
there's actually
Kierkegaard territory.
And there's something
again.
I want to ask you to see if you can expand on this more, because she talks about the difference between a maniacal passion and a generous passion. So I was wondering if you can experience both. Can you experience both like simultaneously?
I think I'm experiencing them right now. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, I mean, I don't, is there a particular passage that you want to?
Let me like kind of peruse the text for it.
Well, I would assume sort of like the maniacal passion is like, I could see there being a generous passion where other individuals sort of benefit from sort of the madman's pursuit of his ideal, whereas what was the other one? The monstrous or the maniacal passion is being one that consumes other individuals in the pursuit of that ideal, mm-hmm. Right? And I mean, that's the big issue, right? That's the big issue with the passionate man is that, you know, why is this so problematic on the existentialist perspective, aside from the fact that he has anguish and that maybe he uses other individuals or something like that? Like, so what we noticed last time is that the freedom of the individual on existentialist conversion, like my existential freedom is bound up in also who else's existential freedom.
Everyone else's.
Everyone else's. And the passionate man typically requires a great deal of isolation, seclusion for him to sort of dream up his machinations about world conquest or entrepreneurial conquest or philosophical or whatever sort of conquest or whatever. And that's injurious to the whole sort of ethics of ambiguity, where we're trying to get everybody to be these sort of emanating fields of freedom that are opening up other people to possibilities and opportunities to disclose themselves with vitality and intelligence. So the passionate man rips away the possibility of opening up other people to disclosure. So that's part of the maniacal aspect of it.
Yeah, and actually, Simone makes a really, there's a quotation that I'll read. We see that no existence can be validly fulfilled if it is limited to itself. So I think it's really wonderful, because philosophy, there's like this typical perception that, you know, you're a Heraclitus and you're just sitting on a rock and you're isolated and you're brooding. But Simone really says in order to fulfill your life to the fullest is you have to be engaged with other people. Like no man is an island, essentially.
Totally. Yeah, it definitely gives a new hue and a new color to that. So what do you think about all this? That's the thing I want to think about. So how do you view passionate men in light of the psychological or existential diagnosis of them? I mean, are you buying, you selling? I mean, is she making some good points? I mean, you know what? You know, I don't know. I don't care. I don't care if you want to sort of operate on me. Let's say I'm the passionate man, okay? And what Simone has just said here, like, are there tremendous? I mean, are there really terrible existential failings? I mean, is this going to be such a bad perspective to have?
I mean, I think that's why her distinction between the generous, the maniacal is so important because I tend to think of the generous being more generative, like leaning towards the arts, because she says that passionate people are also liable or more prone to fall into fascism, and they can also be co-opted into movements. So in my mind, her distinction of the different types of passionate people seems instrumental to me.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the thing, right? It's like, why couldn't... I don't think I could be co-opted into a totalitarian movement. Not now. Not now. Not now at this stage in my life. So maybe I'm not an appropriate representative of the passionate man. The question is, what's keeping me from doing that? Like, why couldn't I get swept away in some sort of movement? I mean, truthfully, anyone can at any point. It's not like It's not like we're calcified into these forms. Like, I could become, like, I don't know, when I'm like 55 years old, I could be the grumpiest old man and like just like, engage in the most heinous groupthink. But at least not right now. And I wonder what's preventing my passion from being co-opted.
I mean, could you have already had a existentialist conversion?
I suppose so. I mean, but I think my existentialist conversion is still situated within a religious context. Mm-hmm. We've had many conversations that come down, it seems like a lot of the conversations that we come down to, the ones that we have off mic and the ones that we have on mic, sort of come down to this sort of radical privileging of persons, whether it be in the conversations I have with CJ about Schiller or about Barth and photography, or with you, me, and Matt over lunch about, how we respect ends. It seems like everything kind of comes down to that for me. So I don't know. I don't know if I had the existentialist conversion through Simone or through what is ultimately seen as sort of a existentialist religious viewpoint.
Yeah, and she even says, I don't know if you remember this, but she actually makes a point about Christianity to a degree reconciling with existentialism.
Oh, does she really?
And she actually even goes so far to quote an anti-fascist priest.
What did she say?
Who said, he, obviously meaning God, with a capital H, had such respect for man that he created him free.
Yeah, yeah. That I was going over the podcast that we did with Clifford on poetry, and it's a little garbled because it was on Skype and it cut out for just a second. But did you hear that Clifford was like, "The Lord is an existentialist. You got to meet him halfway."
I didn't.
When Clifford did that, and I was like,
that
is like one of the most quotable things that Cliff put on that podcast. He's like, yeah, he's not going to figure it out all for you. You're going to have to make these leaps, and that's what Kierkegaard's all about. But we'll talk about that another day. But it's interesting how it's all sort of bleeding into one another and tying together. So I guess the thing I just wanted to ask here is what do we know about the ethics of ambiguity thus far? We know three things. Unless you have more that you want to say about the passionate man.
Oh, no, go for it.
Yeah, that it consists of sets of values that we create. They're conditional values, right? They're compatible with democratic society.
Correct.
And it either directly or indirectly aims at the liberation of others, okay, towards conditional value, okay? So she considers another response to the ambiguous condition. This is the one of sort of intellectualism. I kind of, for the sake of time, I sort of grouped philosophical intellectualism and historical intellectualism sort of into the same thing, where these individuals are starting to get at objective truth, things that are supposedly eternally true for everybody. And she's going to say, why is this not going to be the case that someone who's intellectual can transcend the ambiguous condition? Why is this not going to be a proper response to life where we both simultaneously recognize our supremacy within the physical order, but that we can also be annihilated by it, right? What is her critique of this perspective?
Well, I mean, I would say like that one aspect of it is that a lot of times there's this tendency for scholars to try to detach themselves and look at things with sort of a serene detachment, like she refers to, well, I'm going to throw myself under the bus, like classicists, how you can sort of take in what's around you, but not particularly engage with it.
Right.
Which she says that's not an option.
Well, and why is that so bad? Why is it so bad to remove yourself from the historical narrative, this march of time, to just contemplate eternal verities, be they this cyclical historical truths that just go on and on and on and on, or like contemplating like the forms or whatever else. What's problematic about that from her perspective? I mean, contextualize it in the historical epoch that she's living in. Like to just sit there and daydream about philosophical ideas when what's happening around her.
I mean, like the entire European continent is getting just like ripped apart.
You've got like genocide happening, right?
Yeah,
You've got civilization on fire, right? And you're sitting here like just like sipping your coffee and like trying to figure out the Hegelian dialectic. Like it's so incredibly selfish,
it's not
right?
happening. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the idea, right, is that if you try to sort of transcend the horror of like the ambiguous condition or whatever by doing that, like you're ultimately doing something incredibly unethical because you're not being a participant in the change that could help liberate others, right?
Right.
It's remarkably selfish.
Yeah, and I mean, especially just to see, I mean, just to completely disengage from the atrocities of the Holocaust. I mean, that's everyone I think would be culpable in saying, "Oh, well, this isn't my fight, so I'm not gonna, partake in it."
I'm guilty of this. How are we doing on time, Matt? We good? I'm guilty of this because I think I've withdrawn from the political system a little bit. Like I kind of felt like ideas don't matter. I mean, I'm trying to make the case that ideas do matter by doing something like this. But for a long time, I would very much approach politics from a philosophical sort of perspective. And I realized that regardless of how many facts, figures, arguments I had, it didn't convince anybody. Have you ever convinced anybody in a political argument?
I don't think so.
No, it never works. And that's an interesting, and that probably ties into Simone de Beauvoir and talks about why people will fight to the death for political values, right? Like, because like they can't live in a world where they're wrong or don't know the answer, right? Like it's too uncomfortable. So they'd rather be irrational and vote or argue for certain values than to actually have a meaningful exchange of ideas. It's too uncomfortable.
Which is funny because I almost see it from like that, like the opposite. Because my perspective is, I vote because I think that it's a privilege that most people don't have, and so for me, it's an ethical, undertaking that I do because a lot of people don't have that right.
I vote, but what I'm talking about is I've totally disengaged from what's going on in the geopolitical world. Mm-hmm. I'm like, why am I have a limited amount of brain space. No one is won over by my arguments. So I'm just going to concentrate. I am this person. I am the person who's tried to transcend the ambiguous condition through intellectual thought, right? I'm just like, none of y'all are listening. Nothing will ever change. God will sort it out one day. In the meantime, I'm going to do me. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to learn. Wisdom induces such ecstasy. And what's the situation that we're staring at right now? We've got a genocide going on in Syria. We've got refugees. And the people that are running for the presidency, are they the best and the brightest that we have to offer here in America? Some would say no.
Probably not.
And I took myself out of that process. And I'm not trying to give myself too much power, but I think I share some of the blame in this.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to be said by having a role, no matter how tacit or, how seemingly small, it's still a role. You can speak volumes by doing nothing.
Yeah, I think by me withdrawing, I've created a vacuum for other people to speak up. Mm-hmm. And there are certain individuals that we might not want to be speaking in that place.
Right.
So I have to probably rethink my political posture. Okay. So what about, we spoke a little bit about passionate people being artists or something like that. I guess the only other thing, I would say this about the intellectual or whatever, the intellectuals oftentimes subscribe to ready-made values even though they don't know it. Mm-hmm. So they're really no different than like the submen in some way, which shouldn't really surprise us because submen can be hyper intelligent as well. I think about this with a lot of people who do public intellectualism and really a great deal of inspiration for why we do Noetic. Like I think about I love like what people like Neil deGrasse Tyson and stuff like that have done for like astrophysics and popularizing it. And I love the fact that like people like Sam Harris have done something getting people to think about free will, and like Richard Dawkins has like created certain ideas about how biology works and stuff like that. But they all sort of react. They're all like sort of. They all sort of react from sort of a reflexive position where they all sort of like that you share certain values with them, and like you're in the club or you're not.
They're always camps.
Yeah, and I find that to be super problematic. We are running up against a break, so we'll dive back into the material. This is a short podcast. We'll do another short one. It won't be very long, but we'll come back and do the fourth installment here in a second, guys.
Yep. We'll see you soon.
All right, bye.